At the family barbecue, my phone lit up. Walk away. Don't talk to anyone. Now. I slipped out quietly. Minutes later, squad cars filled my daughter-in-law's driveway. But let me back up a bit, because that moment changed everything I thought I knew about my family. I'm Lucia, and at 65, I've learned that family gatherings can be more exhausting than a day of hard labor. This particular Saturday afternoon at Amanda's house was no different. The annual barbecue that my son Robert insisted we continue having, even though the atmosphere had grown colder each year. Amanda stood by the grill, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the July heat, directing Robert like he was hired help, rather than her husband of 8 years. She wore one of those expensive sundresses that somehow managed to look effortless, while probably costing more than my monthly grocery budget. "Robert, the stakes are burning," she called out, her voice carrying that particular edge I'd grown to recognize.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
It was the same tone she used when correcting me about how I loaded her dishwasher, or when she'd mention, ever so sweetly, that perhaps I should call before visiting next time. I sat at the patio table, watching my grandchildren Emma and Jake play in the backyard, trying to ignore the familiar knot in my stomach that formed whenever I was around Amanda. 8 years of these gatherings, and I still felt like an unwelcome guest in my own son's home. "Grandma Lucia, watch this." "Watch," Emma called out, attempting a cartwheel that ended in a giggling heap on the grass. At 7, she still saw me as someone worth impressing, though I wondered how much longer that would last under Amanda's subtle influence. "That was beautiful, sweetheart," I called back, meaning every word. These moments with the grandchildren were the only reason I endured these increasingly tense family events. Amanda appeared beside me, holding a glass of wine that was clearly not her first of the afternoon. "Lucia, we need to talk about something." She sat down uninvited, positioning herself so close I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the sharp scent of alcohol. My heart rate picked up slightly. Conversations that started with, "we need to talk," in Amanda's vocabulary rarely ended well for me. "Robert and I have been discussing the children's future," she began, her voice taking on that practiced sweetness that never quite reached her eyes. "We think it might be time to establish some boundaries about visits and, well, influence." I felt my mouth go dry. "What kind of boundaries?" "Nothing dramatic," she said with a wave of her manicured hand. "Just some structure. You know how confusing it can be for children when they get mixed messages about values and expectations. Mixed messages. As if my love and attention were somehow corrupting her perfect family dynamic. "I'm not sure I understand," I said, though I was beginning to understand all too clearly. Amanda's smile tightened just a fraction. "Well, for instance, when you tell Emma that it's okay to get dirty playing outside, it undermines the standards we're trying to set about taking care of nice things. And when you give them candy before dinner, it contradicts our nutrition rules." I stared at her, processing what I was hearing. 8 years of walking on eggshells, of second-guessing every interaction with my own grandchildren, and now this. She was essentially telling me that my very presence was a problem to be managed. "I see," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "I knew you'd understand," Amanda continued, clearly emboldened by what she interpreted as compliance. "We're just trying to raise the children with consistent messages. I'm sure you can appreciate that." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Walk away. Don't talk to anyone. Now." I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to process the words. Walk away from what? Who was texting me? The message felt urgent, almost desperate. "Excuse me," I murmured to Amanda, standing up on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. "I need to take this." I moved toward the side gate, my phone buzzing again with the same message, this time in all capitals. "Walk away. Don't talk to anyone. Now." My hands were shaking as I opened the gate and stepped onto the sidewalk. Behind me, I could hear the normal sounds of the barbecue continuing. Robert calling out something about the game on TV, the children laughing, Amanda's voice sharp as she directed some new domestic crisis. I made it to my car parked across the street and turned back toward the house just as the first police cruiser rounded the corner. Then another, and another. Within minutes, Amanda's perfect suburban street looked like a crime scene. Officers in tactical gear emerged from vehicles, radios crackling with urgent communications I couldn't quite make out from my distance. I sat in my car, engine running, watching my son's life implode in real time. Neighbors emerged from their houses, phones out, recording everything. The children's laughter had stopped. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Are you safe? Don't go back. I'll explain everything later. As I drove away on autopilot, my mind reeling with questions I couldn't answer, one thought kept echoing. Whoever had sent those messages had just saved me from something. But from what? And how did they know? The woman who had just been lecturing me about boundaries and family values was now watching police officers march up her front walkway. And somehow, someone had known this was going to happen. The perfect family barbecue I'd been dreading had become the day everything I thought I knew about my son's marriage began to unravel. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes before pulling into a McDonald's parking lot, my hands still trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. The normalcy of the place felt surreal after what I'd just witnessed. Families with children ordering happy meals while my world had just tilted off its axis. My phone rang. Robert's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, where did you go?" His voice sounded strained, confused. "The police want to talk to everyone who was here today." I closed my eyes, trying to find my voice. I had to leave. I wasn't feeling well. "But Mom, this is serious. They're asking about Amanda, about her computer, her business dealings. I don't understand what's happening." His voice cracked on those last words, and I could hear the little boy he used to be, the one who would run to me when he scraped his knee or had a nightmare, the one who trusted me to make everything better. "What are they saying, Robert?" "Something about identity theft, financial fraud. They have boxes of documents, computer equipment. They've been watching the house for weeks." He paused, and I could hear Amanda's voice in the background, sharp and defensive. "Mom, they're saying Amanda might have been using other people's information to open accounts, apply for credit cards. But that's impossible, right? Amanda would never." The words hung in the air between us like a question neither of us wanted to answer. I thought about all the times Amanda had asked seemingly innocent questions about my personal information. My maiden name for family tree research, my social security number for emergency contact forms at the children's school, details about my late husband's finances when she was helping me organize my paperwork after he passed. Each memory felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place, forming a picture I'd been too trusting to see before. "Robert," I said carefully, "I need to ask you something. Has Amanda ever had access to my personal documents?" Silence stretched between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. "She helped you organize Dad's estate papers last year, remember? And she's been handling some of your bills since you've been having trouble with that new online banking system." My stomach dropped. I hadn't been having trouble with online banking. Amanda had convinced Robert I was struggling with technology, that I needed help managing my finances. She'd insisted on setting up automatic payments, said it would be easier for me. I'd been grateful, thought she was being kind. "She also helped you with those credit card applications," Robert continued, his voice growing more uncertain with each word. "The ones for building your credit score after Dad died. She said it was important for seniors to maintain good credit. Credit card applications I'd never seen. Bills I'd never received statements for." A growing sick feeling spread through my chest as the full scope of what might have been happening became clear. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here," I whispered. "The police want to interview you too. They said anyone who had regular contact with Amanda needs to answer some questions. Can you come back?" I looked at my phone screen where the mysterious warning messages still glowed. Someone had known this was going to happen. Someone had specifically warned me to stay away from what was clearly going to be a very uncomfortable conversation with law enforcement. "I'll come by tomorrow," I told Robert. "I need some time to process this." "Okay," he said, though he sounded lost. "Mom, I'm scared. What if Amanda really did something wrong? What about the kids? What about our house payments? What if everything we have?" "We'll figure it out," I said, though I had no idea how. "Just take care of Emma and Jake right now." After I hung up, I sat in that parking lot as the afternoon sun began to set, trying to make sense of 8 years of marriage I'd watched from the sidelines. Amanda's expensive tastes that never seemed to match Robert's teacher salary, the designer clothes, the luxury car, the kitchen renovation that cost more than Robert made in 6 months. I'd assumed they had savings I didn't know about. maybe family money from Amanda's side. Now I wondered if it had all been funded by stolen identities, fraudulent accounts, credit lines opened in other people's names, maybe even mine. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Are you somewhere safe? Don't go home tonight. She knows people were watching the house. She might know you received a warning." My hands started shaking again. "Who is this?" I typed back. "Someone who knows what Amanda is capable of. Can you get a hotel room? Pay cash if possible." A hotel room? Pay cash? This was starting to sound like something out of a movie, not my quiet suburban life. But then again, 6 hours ago, I wouldn't have believed my daughter-in-law was a criminal either. "Why should I trust you?" I typed. "Because 3 months ago, Amanda tried to have you declared mentally incompetent so she could get power of attorney over your finances. I have the paperwork she filed. She only backed down when Robert refused to sign the affidavit." The phone slipped from my hands and clattered to the floor of my car. Mentally incompetent. Power of attorney. The conversations about my struggles with technology suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. Amanda hadn't been trying to help me with my finances. She'd been trying to gain legal control over them. I picked up the phone with shaking fingers and typed, "Who are you?" Someone who was almost another one of her victims. "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. Riverside Park near the duck pond. Come alone. I have things you need to see." I stared at the message, fear and curiosity warring in my chest. This person clearly knew more about Amanda than I did, maybe more than Robert did. But meeting a stranger in a park based on anonymous text messages seemed like the kind of thing Amanda would have called evidence of my declining mental capacity. Then again, Amanda's opinion of my mental capacity was apparently not as innocent as I'd thought. "Okay," I typed back. That night, I checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, paying cash like my mysterious contact had suggested. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial cleaning solution, but it felt safer than going home to my apartment. Safer from what, I wasn't entirely sure. But the urgency in those text messages had been real. I sat on the scratchy bedspread, trying to reconstruct the timeline of Amanda's helpfulness in my life. It had started innocently enough after my husband died 3 years ago. She'd offered to help me sort through his papers, set up online banking, organize my bills. I'd been grateful, grieving, and overwhelmed. I'd welcomed her assistance. But now, looking back with new eyes, I could see the pattern. Every kindness had come with questions about my personal information. Every helpful gesture had given her access to another piece of my financial life. She'd slowly, methodically, gained access to everything she needed to steal my identity. The credit cards she'd helped me apply for, the automatic bill payments she'd set up, the documents she'd organized and then offered to keep safe for me. I thought she was being a good daughter-in-law. Instead, she'd been systematically robbing me, and Robert had helped her do it, never suspecting that his wife was using his mother as a source of personal information to fund their lifestyle. I thought about the conversation we'd been having right before the police arrived. Amanda establishing boundaries about my relationship with the grandchildren. Was that her next step? Cutting me off from the family entirely so I wouldn't be around to notice discrepancies in my accounts? Or worse, so she could move forward with having me declared incompetent without my interference? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't just Robert's mother in Amanda's eyes. I was a resource to be managed, exploited, and ultimately discarded when I was no longer useful. At midnight, lying in that uncomfortable motel bed staring at the ceiling, one terrible thought kept circling through my mind. If Amanda had been stealing my identity for years, what else had she done? What other crimes was she involved in that warranted a police raid with tactical officers? And whoever had sent me those warning messages knew the answers to those questions. The next morning, I arrived at Riverside Park 30 minutes early, my nerves making it impossible to sit still in that motel room. The duck pond was peaceful, families with young children tossing bread to the waterfowl, normal life continuing while mine had been turned upside down. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, watching an elderly man teach his grandson how to skip stones. It reminded me of Robert at that age, before Amanda, before everything became complicated, when family meant unconditional love instead of calculated manipulation. At exactly 10 a.m., A woman approached the bench where I was sitting. She was probably in her 40s, with short brown hair and tired eyes that held a familiar pain. She looked like someone who'd been through her own battle and survived, but barely. "Lucia?" she asked quietly. I nodded, and she sat down beside me, keeping a careful distance. "My name is Diana," she said. "Until 6 months ago, I was Amanda's business partner." The words hit me like a physical blow. Business partner. What business? Robert had never mentioned Amanda having a business partner, or even a business for that matter. "I was the one who sent you those messages yesterday," Diana continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been watching Amanda for months, waiting for the police to finally act. When I saw your name on some of the documents in her files, I knew I had to warn you." "What kind of documents?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Diana reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "The kind that could have destroyed your life." Diana opened the manila folder with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside were photocopies of documents that made my blood run cold. My social security card, my birth certificate, bank statements with my name but account numbers I'd never seen before, credit applications filled out in handwriting that looked like mine but wasn't quite right. "She's good at forgery," Diana said quietly, watching my face as I processed what I was seeing. Took me weeks of practice to spot the differences between her work and real signatures. I picked up one of the credit card applications with shaking fingers. The signature looked remarkably like mine, but the pressure was wrong. The loops slightly too rounded. Someone had practiced writing my name until they could fool most people. "How many accounts?" I whispered. 17 that I found before I got out. Credit cards, store accounts, even a small business loan she took out in your name. Diana pulled out more papers. But that's not the worst part. I looked at her, not sure I could handle anything worse than discovering my daughter-in-law had been systematically stealing my identity for years. Amanda wasn't just stealing from you. She was running an entire operation. At least 12 other victims that I know of. Mostly elderly women with grown children who trusted her. Diana's voice was flat, emotionless, like she'd told this story so many times it had lost its power to shock her. She targeted women who'd recently lost their husbands, women who seemed isolated from their families, women who would appreciate help with their finances. The puzzle pieces were clicking together with sickening clarity. "How did you get involved with her?" Diana was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the duck pond. "My mother died 2 years ago, Alzheimer's. Amanda somehow found out about it through the obituary and contacted me about a month later. Said she ran a service helping families manage estate planning and financial transitions after loss." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. She was so professional, so sympathetic. Had references, a nice office, business cards. She said she specialized in helping adult children navigate their parents' financial affairs during difficult times. Made it sound like such a blessing. What happened? She started small, helped me organize Mom's paperwork, set up an estate account, handle some of the medical bills that were still coming in. Everything seemed legitimate. Diana's voice got harder. Then I started noticing discrepancies, bills that didn't match services, accounts I'd never heard of, charges that seemed too high. When I questioned her about it, she always had explanations. Administrative fees, processing costs, things that sounded reasonable but never quite added up. I thought about my own experience with Amanda's help. The way she'd always had logical explanations for why things were complicated, why certain bills were higher than expected, why some statements might not arrive on time. "How did you figure it out?" I got suspicious enough to hire a private investigator. Cost me $3,000 I couldn't really afford, but it saved me from losing everything. Diana pulled out more documents. He found the real scope of what she was doing. Not just financial fraud, but a whole network of false identities, shell companies, fabricated businesses. She'd been at this for at least 5 years before I ever met her. My heart was pounding. 5 years. That means she was already running these scams when she met Robert. "Lucia, I don't think she met Robert by accident. I think she targeted your family specifically." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" Diana hesitated, clearly struggling with how much to tell me. "The investigator found evidence that Amanda researches potential targets very carefully. She looks for recently widowed women with adult children who have stable incomes, but might be trusting enough to let their wives handle family financial matters. I felt sick. She chose Robert because of me. She chose Robert because he gave her access to you, and you fit the profile of her ideal victim. Recently widowed, trusting, probably overwhelmed by financial management, and with a son who would appreciate having someone take some of that burden off his shoulders. The manipulation was so much deeper than I'd imagined. Amanda hadn't just married into our family and then decided to exploit me. She'd planned it from the beginning. Every family dinner, every offer to help, every sweet gesture toward the grandchildren had been part of a calculated scheme to gain my trust and access to my personal information. "Why didn't you go to the police sooner?" I asked. "I tried, but Amanda is smart. She covers her tracks well, and she has contingency plans." Diana's expression darkened. "When I first started asking questions, she convinced my own brother that I was having some kind of breakdown from grief. She had documentation showing that I'd been making erratic financial decisions, that I was confused about my mother's estate, that maybe the stress was affecting my judgment. I remembered the conversation about having me declared mentally incompetent. She tried the same thing with me. It's her standard defense. If victims start asking questions, she questions their mental capacity. Makes it seem like they're confused, paranoid, unable to handle their own affairs. By the time people realize what's happening, she's usually moved on to new targets. But you have evidence now." "I have some evidence. But Lucia, you need to understand something about Amanda. She doesn't just steal money. She destroys people who threaten her operation." Diana's voice dropped to almost a whisper. 2 of her previous victims died under suspicious circumstances. Both were elderly women who'd started asking questions about discrepancies in their accounts. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Are you saying I'm saying the police investigation isn't just about financial fraud. There are other charges being considered. More serious charges." We sat in silence for several minutes, the cheerful sounds of families enjoying the park seeming to come from another world. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my son's marriage, about my own life, had been turned upside down in less than 24 hours. "Why are you helping me?" I finally asked. "Because when I realized what she was doing to you, I saw myself 2 years ago. Trusting, grateful for help, completely blind to what was really happening." Diana closed the folder. "And because I think you might be the key to stopping her permanently." "What do you mean?" "You're the only victim who has family that might listen, who might be willing to testify. Most of her other targets were truly isolated. No children or children who lived far away and didn't stay in close contact. But Robert loves you, even if he's been manipulated. If he understands what Amanda has been doing, he might be willing to help build a case against her." I thought about my son, probably at home right now trying to process the police raid, trying to understand how his wife could be involved in serious criminal activity. How would he react when he learned that their entire relationship was built on her plan to exploit his mother? "There's something else you need to know," Diana said. "Amanda knows that someone tipped you off yesterday. She saw you leave right before the police arrived, and she's not stupid. She's going to realize that someone warned you. Is that dangerous?" "Amanda doesn't leave loose ends, Lucia. And right now, you and I are the biggest loose ends in her operation." The fear that had been simmering since yesterday suddenly crystallized into something sharp and immediate. "What should I do?" "First, don't go home. Don't go anywhere Amanda might expect to find you. Second, we need to get you to the police as soon as possible to tell them everything you know about her access to your personal information." Diana stood up. "And third, we need to make sure Robert understands what's really been happening before Amanda has a chance to spin this as some kind of misunderstanding or mistake." As we walked toward the parking area, I felt like I was leaving behind the last remnants of the life I'd known. The quiet widow who trusted her daughter-in-law, who was grateful for help with finances, who believed family meant safety and love. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who now understood that the people closest to you could be the most dangerous. "Diana," I said as we reached our cars, "how do I tell my son that his wife never loved him, that everything about their marriage was a lie designed to get to me?" She looked at me with eyes that held years of hard-won wisdom. "You tell him the truth, and you hope that love is stronger than manipulation, because if it's not, you might lose more than just money in this fight." As I drove away from the park, Following Diana to the police station, I realized that the worst part wasn't the financial fraud or even the identity theft. It was the knowledge that Amanda had looked at my family and seen nothing but opportunity. My son's love, my grandchildren's trust, my own grief and vulnerability had all been nothing more than tools in her criminal operation. But if Diana was right, if there was a chance to stop Amanda permanently, then maybe some good could come from this nightmare. Maybe other families could be spared what mine was going through. The question was whether Robert would be able to see past 8 years of manipulation to help me make that happen. The police station was nothing like what I'd expected. Detective Martinez was a kind-faced woman about my age who listened to my story without judgment, taking notes while Diana provided copies of the documents we'd reviewed at the park. The whole process took 3 hours, and by the end of it, I felt drained but oddly relieved to have everything out in the open. "Mrs. Patterson," Detective Martinez said as we wrapped up, "I want you to know that what you've told us today confirms several aspects of our investigation. Amanda Chen has been on our radar for months, but cases like this are complex. We needed victims willing to come forward with detailed testimony." "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll be executing additional search warrants based on the information you've provided. We'll also need you to review your financial records going back at least 3 years. Can you access your bank statements and credit reports?" I realized I had no idea what my credit reports looked like. Amanda had been monitoring them for me, making sure everything was accurate. Now I wondered what I'd find when I actually looked for myself. "I'll get everything together," I promised. As Diana and I left the station, I felt my phone buzzing with yet another call from Robert. I'd been avoiding his calls all morning, not ready to explain where I was or what I was learning about his wife. "You have to talk to him eventually," Diana said gently. "I know. I just don't know how to start. Start with the truth. He's going to find out anyway when Amanda gets arrested." The word arrested still felt surreal. Yesterday, Amanda had been lecturing me about boundaries with my grandchildren. Today, she was facing serious criminal charges that could send her to prison for years. "Diana, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." When you found out about your mother's case, did you blame yourself? For trusting Amanda? For not seeing the signs earlier?" She stopped walking and turned to face me. Every single day for 6 months, I kept thinking if I'd been smarter, more suspicious, less grateful for help, I could have prevented it. She paused, but then I realized that blaming myself was just another way of letting Amanda win. She counted on victims feeling stupid and ashamed. It kept us quiet. We'd reached our cars when my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Robert. It was Emma, my 7-year-old granddaughter, calling from what was probably Robert's phone. "Grandma Lucia? Daddy says you're sick and that's why you couldn't stay at our barbecue yesterday. Are you okay?" My heart broke a little. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just dealing with some grown-up problems. Mommy is really upset about something. She's been crying and talking loud to Daddy. Jake is scared." I closed my eyes, picturing my grandchildren caught in the middle of this chaos, not understanding why their world was suddenly full of tension and angry voices. "Emma, honey, can you put Daddy on the phone?" "Okay. I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, baby." Robert's voice came on the line, tight with stress. "Mom, we really need to talk. Things are getting complicated here, and I need to understand what's happening." "Where are you now?" "At my school. I brought the kids with me because the house is still considered a crime scene. They have to process Amanda's office and computer equipment." His voice cracked slightly. "Mom, they're talking about serious charges. Identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. I don't understand how any of this is possible." "Can you meet me somewhere? Somewhere private where we can talk?" "Yes, please. I need my mother right now." We arranged to meet at the playground behind his elementary school, a place where we could talk while the kids played and burned off some of their nervous energy. As I drove there, I rehearsed different ways to explain what I'd learned, but nothing seemed adequate for telling someone that their marriage was built on a criminal conspiracy. Robert was sitting on a bench when I arrived, looking older than his 35 years. Emma and Jake were on the swings, their voices carrying across the playground with forced cheerfulness. They were trying to act normal in a situation that was anything but. "Mom," he said as I sat down beside him. I'm so confused. Yesterday morning I was married to someone I thought I knew, and now the police are telling me she might be involved in organized fraud. How is that possible? I took his hand in mine, the way I used to when he was small and scared. Robert, there are things about Amanda that neither of us knew, things she's been hiding from the very beginning. Over the next hour, I told him everything. About Diana's call, about the documents, about Amanda's pattern of targeting recent widows through their children. I watched his face change as the pieces fell into place, as he began to see his relationship through the lens of manipulation rather than love. She researched us, he said finally, his voice hollow. Before we ever met, she knew about Dad dying, about you being alone, about my job and income. She planned it all. I'm afraid so. He was quiet for a long time, watching Emma push Jake on the tire swing. I keep thinking about our first date, how she seemed so interested in my family, wanted to know all about you and Dad. I thought she was being caring, wanting to understand my background. He laughed bitterly. She was doing research. Robert, this isn't your fault. She's a professional con artist. She's fooled a lot of people. But I married her, Mom. I had children with her. I let her into your life, gave her access to hurt you. Tears were rolling down his cheeks now. How do I explain to Emma and Jake that their mother is going to prison? How do I tell them that everything they thought they knew about our family was a lie? It was a question I couldn't answer. These were consequences I hadn't considered in my focus on the financial crimes and identity theft. 2 innocent children were about to lose their mother, their home, their sense of security, all because of Amanda's choices. We'll figure it out together, I said, though I had no idea how. There's something else, Robert said. Something I didn't tell the police because I wasn't sure if it was important. But now, with everything you've told me, what is it? Amanda has been talking about moving. She said she'd found a great opportunity in another state, that we should consider relocating for a fresh start. She'd already started looking at houses online, researching school districts. He met my eyes. I think she was planning to run. A chill ran down my spine. If Diana was right about Amanda not leaving loose ends, a cross-country move would have been the perfect way to disappear with whatever money she'd stolen while leaving her victims behind to deal with the aftermath. When did she start talking about this? About 2 months ago, right after. He paused, his expression shifting. Right after she asked me to sign some papers about your medical care. She said you'd asked her to help set up some kind of advance directive, but you seemed confused about the details. My blood ran cold. What kind of papers? Something about medical power of attorney in case you became unable to make decisions for yourself. She said you were worried about having another episode like the one where you got confused about the online banking. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Amanda hadn't just been stealing my identity for financial gain. She'd been laying the groundwork to have me declared incompetent so she could gain complete control over my assets. And she'd been planning to move the family away before anyone could discover what she'd done. Robert, I never asked her to help with any medical directives, and I was never confused about online banking. She convinced you I was having problems so she could justify taking over my financial management. He stared at me, the full scope of Amanda's manipulation finally becoming clear. She was going to have you committed, wasn't she? Or at least declared mentally incompetent so she could control your money legally. That's exactly what she was planning. Diana told me Amanda had already filed preliminary paperwork. She only backed down when you refused to sign the affidavit supporting her claims. Robert stood up abruptly, pacing toward the playground equipment. I saved you by accident. I told her I wasn't comfortable signing papers about your mental state without talking to you first, and she got angry, said I was being difficult, that I didn't understand how these things worked. You did save me. Your refusal to sign probably bought us the time we needed for the police investigation to move forward. He turned back to me, his expression shifting from guilt to something harder. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Do you think Amanda ever loved me at all? Or was I just a means to an end from day one? It was the question I'd been dreading, the one I couldn't answer without breaking his heart even further. But he deserved the truth. I think Amanda is incapable of loving anyone the way you deserve to be loved. I think she saw you as a perfect target, kind, trusting, devoted to family, and she exploited those qualities. I paused. But Robert, that doesn't mean the love you felt wasn't real. That doesn't mean the moments of happiness you had together don't matter. Yes, it does, he said quietly. It means everything about my marriage was built on lies. It means my children's mother never actually wanted to be their mother, just needed them as props in her cover story. Emma called out from the monkey bars, asking for help reaching the next rung. Robert went to assist her, and I watched him lift his daughter with the same gentle care he'd always shown, even as his world collapsed around him. When he came back to the bench, he was different. Resolved in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager facing down a school bully. Mom, I want to help the police build their case against Amanda. Whatever they need from me, whatever testimony or evidence I can provide, I want to do it. Are you sure? It won't be easy, and it might get worse before it gets better. I'm sure. She didn't just steal from you, Mom. She stole 8 years of my life, my children's security, our family's trust in each other. I want her to face consequences for all of it. As we gathered the children to leave the playground, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete solidarity with my son. For the first time since he'd married Amanda, we were on the same side, working toward the same goal, but I also felt a growing sense of urgency. If Amanda was as dangerous as Diana believed, and if she was already planning to disappear, we might not have much time to ensure she faced justice for what she'd done to our family and all the others she'd victimized. The next phase of this nightmare was about to begin, and this time, Robert and I would face it together. 3 days later, Detective Martinez called with news that changed everything. Amanda had been released on bail, and she was fighting the charges aggressively. Worse, she'd hired an expensive defense attorney who was already claiming the investigation was flawed and his client was being framed by disgruntled business associates. She's claiming that Diana Rodriguez manipulated evidence to implicate her in crimes Diana herself committed, Detective Martinez explained during our phone call. It's a common defense strategy in these cases: create reasonable doubt by pointing fingers at the person who exposed the crimes. I felt sick. Can she get away with that? Not if we build a strong enough case. But Mrs. Patterson, I need to warn you that Amanda's attorney has indicated she might claim you're suffering from age-related cognitive decline, and that your testimony isn't reliable. There it was again. The same strategy Amanda had tried before, questioning my mental capacity to deflect attention from her crimes. But this time, she was doing it through lawyers in a courtroom instead of whispered conversations with Robert. What can we do? We need more evidence. Physical evidence, financial records, testimony from other victims. And we need it quickly because Amanda's attorney is pushing for a speedy trial. After I hung up, I sat in my temporary apartment trying to process what this meant. Diana had warned me that Amanda was dangerous when cornered, but I hadn't expected her to be this aggressive in fighting back. I'd assumed that with all the evidence against her, she'd try to negotiate some kind of plea deal. Instead, she was doubling down, preparing to destroy anyone who threatened her freedom. My phone rang again. This time, it was Robert, and his voice was tight with controlled fury. "Mom, Amanda wants to meet with me. She's saying she can explain everything, that there's been a misunderstanding about her business dealings. Her lawyer says if I don't give her a chance to tell her side of the story, it could affect the custody arrangement for the kids." Robert, that sounds like manipulation. She's using the children as leverage. I know. But what if she's right? What if there's more to this than we understand? What if Diana is lying about some of this? I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice, and I realized Amanda was still working her manipulation even from a distance. Even facing criminal charges, she was finding ways to make people question what they knew to be true. "Do you want me to be there when you meet with her?" "Actually, yes. I think that would help. If she's telling the truth, she shouldn't have any problem explaining everything to both of us." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where Amanda couldn't control the environment the way she had in her own home. Robert would tell her I was coming, giving her a chance to back out if she wasn't prepared to face both of us together. She didn't back out. When I walked into the coffee shop that afternoon, Amanda was already there, sitting across from Robert at a corner table, She looked different than I'd ever seen her. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. She was dressed in jeans and a plain sweater instead of her typical designer outfits. The overall effect was to make her look younger, more vulnerable, less threatening. It was, I realized, another calculated performance. "Lucia," she said as I approached the table, her voice warm with what sounded like genuine relief. "I'm so glad you came. I've been hoping we could clear up this terrible misunderstanding." I sat down without responding, studying her face for any sign of the woman who had systematically stolen my identity and manipulated my family for years. She looked sincere, concerned, almost maternal in her desire to fix whatever had gone wrong between us. "I know the police have been asking you questions about my business," she continued, "and I understand how confusing that must be. But I want you to know that everything I did was legitimate. I run a consulting service that helps families manage financial transitions during difficult times." It was almost exactly what Diana had told me Amanda had said to her. The same cover story, the same reasonable explanation for why she'd had access to so much personal information. "What kind of consulting?" I asked. "Estate planning, bill management, credit monitoring. Services that help people navigate financial complexity during grief or major life changes." Amanda's voice was steady, professional. "When Robert told me about the struggles you were having after your husband passed away, I offered to help as a family favor." "What struggles was I having?" Amanda glanced at Robert, as if seeking permission to continue. "Well, you were having trouble with the online banking system, remember? And you mentioned being overwhelmed by all the paperwork from your husband's estate. You seemed relieved when I offered to help organize everything." I had been relieved, but now I could see how she'd created the problems she then offered to solve. She'd convinced Robert I was struggling with technology I'd never had trouble with before. She'd complicated my financial situation and then positioned herself as the solution. "Amanda," Robert said quietly, "the police found evidence that you opened accounts in my mother's name without her knowledge." "That's not true," she said immediately. "Your mother signed all the paperwork. We went over everything together. If she doesn't remember, it might be because..." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. I felt my temper rising. Even now, sitting across from both of us, she was suggesting that my memory couldn't be trusted. "I remember perfectly well," I said firmly. "I never signed papers for 17 different credit accounts. I never applied for a business loan. I never authorized you to use my personal information for anything other than organizing bills I was already paying." Amanda's expression shifted slightly, becoming more defensive. "Lucia, I understand you're upset about the police investigation, but you need to be careful about making accusations you can't prove. My attorney says that false statements about someone's business dealings can have serious legal consequences." There it was, the threat, delivered with the same sweet smile she'd used when lecturing me about boundaries with my grandchildren. "Are you threatening my mother?" Robert asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Of course not. I'm just trying to help her understand that this situation is more complicated than she realizes. The police are looking for someone to blame for what appears to be a sophisticated fraud operation, and they're using me as a scapegoat because I had legitimate access to client information." "Client information?" I repeated. "Is that what you call my personal documents? Client information? You were a client, Lucia. You hired me to help manage your finances during a difficult transition period. If you don't remember our arrangement clearly, that's understandable given everything you've been through." She was good. Even knowing what I knew about her criminal activities, part of me could see how someone might believe her version of events. She had explanations for everything, reasonable-sounding justifications that painted her as a helpful professional and me as a confused elderly woman. But I wasn't confused anymore. "Amanda," I said calmly, "I want you to explain something to me. If you're a legitimate financial consultant, why did you research Robert and our family before you ever met him? Why did you know about my husband's death, my financial situation, and my supposed need for help before you'd ever spoken to either of us?" For the first time since I'd arrived, Amanda looked genuinely surprised. Her composure slipped just enough for me to see something harder underneath the concerned facade. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "I mean that Diana Rodriguez told me about your methods. How you target recently widowed women through their adult children. How you research potential victims before manufacturing ways to meet them." I leaned forward. "Did you love my son at all? Or was he just a means to access my personal information?" Amanda's mask slipped further. "Diana Rodriguez is a bitter woman who blamed me when her own poor financial decisions caught up with her. She's been harassing me for months, trying to destroy my business because she can't accept responsibility for her own mistakes." "Then explain the documents," Robert said suddenly. "Explain the forged signatures, the accounts Mom never opened, the credit applications she never filled out. I can't explain evidence that may have been fabricated by someone with a grudge against me." Amanda stood up, her pretense of friendly concern finally abandoned. "What I can tell you is that this conversation is over. My attorney advised me not to discuss the case with anyone, and I should have listened to him." She started to leave, then turned back to Robert. "I hope you'll remember that I'm the mother of your children when you decide how to handle this situation. Emma and Jake need their mother, regardless of what lies people are telling about me." After she left, Robert and I sat in silence for several minutes. Around us, the coffee shop continued its normal rhythm, people coming and going, conducting ordinary business while we processed what had just happened. "She almost had me convinced," Robert said finally. "What do you mean?" "For a few minutes there, listening to her explanations, I started wondering if maybe we were wrong, if maybe Diana really was lying, or if there was some other explanation for everything." He shook his head. "But then she threatened you, and I realized that someone who really loved our family would never do that." I reached across the table and took his hand. "She's very good at what she does. That's why she's been successful for so long. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Are you scared of her?" I thought about Diana's warnings, about Amanda's history of not leaving loose ends, about the suspicious deaths of previous victims who'd asked too many questions. "Yes," I said, "I am." "Then we need to end this quickly. Whatever the police need from us to build their case, whatever evidence we can provide, we need to do it fast. I won't let her hurt you or use the children as shields for her crimes." As we left the coffee shop, I felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. Amanda had shown her true face today, dropping the pretense of the caring daughter-in-law and revealing the calculating criminal underneath. But she'd also shown something else: desperation. People who are confident in their position don't resort to threats and intimidation. They don't need to attack their accuser's credibility or question their mental capacity. Amanda's aggressive defense suggested that she knew the evidence against her was strong and she was running out of options. That made her more dangerous, but it also meant we were closer to ending this nightmare than I'd dared to hope. The question was whether we could build the case against her before she decided that the risks of staying and fighting were greater than the risks of running, and whether Robert and I would be safe until this was all over. 2 weeks after our confrontation at the coffee shop, everything changed again. I was having breakfast in my temporary apartment when Detective Martinez called with news that made my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped my coffee cup. "Mrs. Patterson, we've made additional arrests in Amanda's case. It turns out she wasn't working alone." My heart raced. "What do you mean?" "We found evidence of a larger network. Amanda was part of an organized fraud ring that's been operating across 3 states for the past 6 years. Her arrest led us to the other members, including her actual business partner who was helping her process stolen identities and launder money." "Is she talking? Admitting to what she did?" "She's agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Mrs. Patterson, we've recovered over $2 million that was stolen from victims like yourself. You're going to get your money back. Plus, Amanda has provided us with detailed information about how she targeted and manipulated your family." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. After weeks of fear and uncertainty, the idea that this nightmare might actually end seemed impossible to believe. "What about Robert and the children?" "Amanda's cooperation includes testimony about how she selected your son specifically because he fit the profile of someone who would give her access to an ideal victim. She's admitted that she never had genuine feelings for him, and that the children were part of her cover story." The confirmation of what we'd all suspected still hit like a physical blow. Even knowing Amanda was a criminal, Hearing that she'd admitted to using Robert and the children so callously felt devastating. "How is she handling all this news?" I asked. He's relieved that the truth is finally out completely, but he's struggling with what to tell Emma and Jake. "This is going to be a difficult transition for all of you." After Detective Martinez hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about everything that had happened since that text message at the barbecue. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a lonely widow who felt like an unwelcome presence in my own family. I'd accepted Amanda's subtle cruelties and manipulations because I was grateful for any connection to my son and grandchildren. Now I understood that the distance in our family relationships hadn't been natural growing apart. It had been orchestrated by someone who saw my love for my family as a weakness to exploit. My phone rang again. This time it was Robert, and his voice sounded lighter than it had in weeks. "Mom, can you come over? I want to talk to the kids about everything, and I think they need their grandmother here." "Are you sure you're ready for that conversation?" "I'm sure. They've been asking questions about why Mommy isn't living here anymore, why police officers came to our house, why everything feels different. They deserve honest answers, and they deserve to understand that none of this changes how much their family loves them." I drove to Robert's house for the first time since the barbecue that had started this whole ordeal. The police tape was gone, and the house looked normal from the outside, but I could see the emotional damage in Robert's face when he opened the door. "How are you holding up?" I asked as he hugged me. "Better now that I know it's really over. Amanda's attorney contacted me this morning. She's not going to fight the custody arrangement. She's signing away her parental rights." The words hung in the air between us. Even knowing what Amanda was, even understanding that she'd never truly loved the children, the idea that a mother would completely abandon her kids felt shocking. She said through her lawyer that she thinks it's better for Emma and Jake to have a fresh start without her influence. Robert continued. "I think she's right, but it's going to be hard to explain to them." We found Emma and Jake in the living room, playing a board game with unusual quietness. They both looked up when I walked in, and Emma immediately ran to hug me. "Grandma Lucia, Daddy said you might come visit us today. Are you feeling better?" "Much better, sweetheart. I missed you both so much." Robert gathered the children on the couch and sat down across from them. I took a chair nearby, close enough to provide support, but far enough away to let him handle this difficult conversation in his own way. "Emma, Jake, I need to tell you something important about Mommy," he began, his voice gentle but serious. "You know that sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, and those choices have consequences." Both children nodded solemnly. "Mommy made some very bad choices that hurt other people, including Grandma Lucia. The police found out about those choices, and now Mommy has to face consequences for what she did." "Is Mommy going to jail?" Jake asked, his 7-year-old directness cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Yes, buddy. Mommy is going to jail for a while because of the bad choices she made." "But why did she hurt Grandma?" Emma asked, looking at me with confusion that broke my heart. "Grandma is nice. Why would anyone want to hurt her?" Robert struggled for a moment, clearly trying to find words that would explain the inexplicable to young children. "Sometimes people do things for money that hurt other people," he said finally. "Mommy was taking money that didn't belong to her, and she was using Grandma's name to do it. That's called stealing, and it's against the law." "So Mommy is a bad person?" Jake asked. "Mommy did bad things," Robert corrected carefully. "But you and Emma are not responsible for Mommy's choices. Nothing she did was your fault, and nothing she did changes how much Daddy and Grandma and all our family love you." Emma climbed into my lap. "Grandma, are you sad that Mommy hurt you?" I held her close, breathing in the innocent scent of her shampoo. "I'm sad that Mommy made bad choices, but I'm not sad anymore, because now I get to spend more time with you and Jake and Daddy." "Will Mommy ever come back?" Jake asked. Robert and I exchanged glances. "Mommy won't be living with us anymore," Robert said gently. "But that doesn't mean our family is broken. It just means our family looks different now. We have each other, and we have Grandma, and we have aunts and uncles and cousins who love us. Family isn't just about who lives in the same house." Over the next hour, we answered their questions as honestly as we could without giving them more information than they could handle. Emma wanted to know if she'd done something wrong to make Mommy leave. Jake wanted to know if Daddy might leave too. Both of them needed reassurance that the adults they trusted weren't going to abandon them. It was heartbreaking and healing at the same time. Heartbreaking to see how Amanda's crimes had affected these innocent children, but healing to realize that without her manipulation, our family relationships could finally be honest and genuine. That evening, after the children were in bed, Robert and I sat on his back porch talking about the future. "I keep thinking about the past 8 years," he said, "wondering how much of what I thought was real actually happened. Did Amanda ever really enjoy family dinners? Or was she always just gathering information? Did she ever actually care about the kids? Or were they just useful for maintaining her cover story? Does it matter now?" I asked gently. "I guess not. But it's hard to accept that someone I shared a bed with for 8 years, someone I thought I knew completely, was basically a stranger playing a role." "You loved her," I pointed out. "That was real, even if her feelings weren't. And you created Emma and Jake, and they're completely real and wonderful. Do you think they'll be okay, growing up knowing their mother was a criminal who abandoned them?" I thought about the resilience I'd already seen in both children, their ability to adapt to change and find security in the love that remained constant in their lives. "I think they'll be better than okay. They have a father who loves them enough to protect them from someone who would have hurt them eventually. They have a grandmother who's finally free to be part of their lives without walking on eggshells. They have a chance to grow up in a family where love doesn't come with conditions or hidden agendas." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, I owe you an apology. For the past few years, I let Amanda convince me that you were becoming difficult, that you needed to be managed rather than included. I chose her version of events over my own knowledge of who you are. You don't need to apologize for being manipulated by a professional manipulator." "Yes, I do. Because even when she was convincing me you were having problems, part of me knew it didn't make sense. You're one of the smartest, most capable people I know. But it was easier to believe her explanations than to question why my wife might be lying to me about my mother." I reached over and took his hand. "We both learned something important from this experience. We learned that family relationships require vigilance, that we can't take love for granted, and that we have to protect each other from people who would exploit our bonds. I promise I'll never let anyone come between us again," he said. "And I promise I'll speak up if I ever feel like I'm being pushed aside or excluded. No more suffering in silence to keep the peace." 6 months later, I was back in my own apartment, but it felt completely different. Instead of being a lonely refuge from family gatherings I dreaded, it had become a comfortable home base for a life full of meaningful connections. Emma and Jake spent every weekend with me, helping me cook dinner and learning to play card games their grandfather had taught me years ago. Robert called every few days just to talk, sharing details about his work and asking for advice about parenting decisions. Amanda had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The money she'd stolen from me and other victims had been returned, along with interest. More importantly, the organized fraud ring she'd been part of had been completely dismantled, preventing countless other families from experiencing what we'd gone through. Diana and I had become genuine friends. She'd testified at Amanda's trial alongside me, and afterward we'd discovered that we had more in common than just being Amanda's victims. We met for coffee every Tuesday, sharing stories about rebuilding our lives and learning to trust our instincts again. On a warm Saturday afternoon in spring, almost exactly 1 year after the barbecue that changed everything, Robert and the children came over for dinner. As I watched Emma help Jake set the table while Robert told me about his plans to start dating again, I reflected on how completely our family dynamics had transformed. A year ago, I'd felt like an unwelcome intruder in my own family's life. I'd accepted crumbs of attention and been grateful for them. I'd allowed someone else to define my worth and my place in the family structure. Now I was exactly where I belonged, at the center of a family that valued my presence, sought my input, and protected me as fiercely as I protected them. "Grandma," Emma said as we sat down to eat, "will you tell us the story about the princess who saved herself?" I smiled, looking around the table at the faces of the people who mattered most to me. "Once upon a time," I began, "there was a grandmother who thought she'd lost her family, but it turned out her family had just been hidden by a wicked spell, and when the spell was broken, they all found their way back to each other." "How did they break the spell?" Jake asked. By telling the truth, I said, and by remembering that real love doesn't try to control or diminish the people it claims to care about. Real love sets people free to be themselves. As we shared that meal together, I realized that Amanda had inadvertently given us something valuable. In trying to destroy our family bonds for her own gain, she'd forced us to examine what those bonds really meant. In attempting to isolate me from the people I loved, she'd made us all appreciate how much we needed each other. The price of loyalty, I'd learned, wasn't blind trust or silent acceptance of treatment that felt wrong. The price of loyalty was vigilance, honesty, and the courage to fight for relationships that mattered. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that fight led not just to survival, but to something stronger and more genuine than what you'd had before.